but it's kind of small.
Oh. See. Oh, let me see if I can make that bigger. Whoa, too big. Maybe we can. Oh. How's that?
Looks good to me.
All right. Might be a little challenging to get the right. Oh, shoot, am I still on the object? Oh, yep. Sorry. Might be a little challenging to get the right view in this environment because of all the walls and stuff, but do what you got to do. All right. So, I mean, there are probably people in the room that know more about engagement tracking and xAPI than I do. So, feel free to jump in. But this was kind of the very basic outline of, what needs to happen to track user engagement. And this is not really limited to headsets, of course. Like this could be, a mobile app experience or a website or some other interactive, module, even storyline-based modules, that could replace this step here. So user actions are decided in analysis and design, and y'all probably have some experience with that. In deciding, what metrics do we want to track, and what what actions, what behaviors, how long did they spend on something. What did they do when they were faced with a particular decision. And then, the experience is developed and coded with corresponding xAPI statements. Oops. The user accesses that experience via the headset or other device, or however that is delivered. And then the user data is logged based on a profile, and the xAPI statements are that data is sent to the LRS, which stores the xAPI statements and can be integrated with an LMS. And I don't handle a lot of LMS administration either, so at least in my current role. And I know that there are personalized instances of LMSs. I don't know if anybody has kind of any personal experience with integrated LRS to an LMS, or using a separate LRS. But typically the idea is the LMS, can kind of show that data in more digestible forms. So there's a lot of links and a lot of resources here throughout the whole thing, really, and I'll share this in the channel. But starting with that beginning point, just some considerations like, what are your goals? And just some articles that are good to read. I think this is from this article down here. Kind of some guiding key points to consider when you're developing your objectives and your user inputs. And then learning record stores, the little description here, making used in conjunction with xAPI to collect that data, store that data from all different sources, right? So, and the LRS kind of exports these different data, and then that's typically available through your LMS. These are kind of some examples of what xAPI statements look like in a LRS, and just shows you like kind of the timestamp, the profile, the verb, object, type, and then there's a little bit more on this in the coming slides, like the anatomy of a xAPI statement, but you can check these out if you like. And you can see some of the verbs here. Experienced, watched, read, experienced, answered, failed. These are some really great articles. There's a little video in the header link over there that can be helpful, and just kind of comparing, xAPI versus SCORM, and kind of the dissection of that xAPI statement. And then if it, in the next slide is a little bit intimidating, especially for folks who are unfamiliar with or new to coding, but there are tools to help you get started. Learning Dojo has put out a free xAPI statement builder, and that it's basically plug and play. You choose from a series of drop downs, and then it builds the code for you. And the next part is just knowing where to put it, really. And that depends on the tool that you're using to build with. So this is an example of an xAPI statement, just that Sally experienced this solo hang gliding experience, whatever that is. And so you see the actor is Sally, the verb is experienced, and the object is solo hang gliding. And there's different types of results you can get. I wouldn't worry too much about this unless you really, really want to get into it right away, but that it's just kind of good to understand how to structure the statement so that when you're designing your metrics or the things that you want to capture, the information you want to capture, then kind of how to structure your objectives or your metrics or that information. So actor, verb, object. And then, result, context, timestamp. This is a little bit more expanded. And some links and resources over here on finding or building the code. So again, here's the xAPI statement builder. Excellent article that kind of walks through piece by piece, building an xAPI statement, and some resources for using xAPI in Unity. You do need to use like kind of a plugin for that. It's recommended that you do. You can do it without, but you can read this guy's article on attempting that, and I probably would go the easy route and install the GBL xAPI library. And then some other pre-coded interaction toolkits, frameworks that you can use to help build your interactions. And yeah, I think I've linked to some of these before, but they're just really handy. You know, a lot of this is rather than reinventing the wheel, like finding what other people have already created and adapting it, and you know, have made available to people to use for free, of course. Which there's a lot of that out there, in forums, in YouTube videos. You guys know where to look, but there's, you know, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to, and find what's out there and make it work for your project is really like the lesson I keep learning from people when it comes to code. But I didn't get so far as to finish testing with an LRS, but there are some free resources out there where you can like use a not like a, I mean, I guess it's kind of like a free LRS, but it's more like a testing ground. I don't think you can test with like a big number of users, but you know, at least if you're just like testing a small project for personal reasons or personal development, or before you send it to a client, maybe to see if it works with their LRS in advance, you know, you can do that. But I'll find the link to that and add that in here. I don't know. That's I kind of whipped through these slides about 3 times faster than I thought I would. But is there anything anybody wants to go back to or look at, or?
I'll throw in another LRS just quick. LRS.io. Yeah, that's one. That's one that I use. It's like a testing like grounds for, like, it's basically free. Like it leads to a website called Veracity Learning. LRS.io. That's one I used for some sandboxing.
Awesome.
But other than that, go ahead.
Any I mean, for anybody who's had more experience with this, do you are there any specific challenges that you run into?
I can share more about that. Although I'm not, like the company that I'm working with doesn't use xAPI as a standard right now, but I do foresee it as being like the upcoming standard, right? Like I know that for sure that like Scrum's going to get replaced at some point. You know, like it's just an old standard. Like, so it's been used for years, but like there's xAPI is like the next standard. So I think that it's good that people are having these discussions. And then I really like this your presentation here, because it's important to talk about. You know, it's going to be the next upcoming standard from what I believe anyway. So yeah, like I went to like a recent like e-learning conference recently, right? It's like where they have, it's basically all digital, like it's like 2D and 3D and VR, like all kinds of digital training. And I talked to a lot of different people about xAPI. So there's like a lot of solutions out there, you know, like the ones you brought up. I've looked at a little bit too, and people are working on kind of like, I think the biggest hurdle with xAPI has been like the coding aspect of it. Like for years, people have been like really just, okay, like Scrum is like so built into like a lot of these programs already that all you have to do is like choose the outcome you want and publish. That's pretty much how easy it is with Scrum anymore. But with xAPI, right, like it's flexible, but also a little bit more complex in that sense too, because you have to write the statements, the action verb, like the verbs and stuff like that that go with like what outcomes you want. So it adds a little more complexity to things, but in the end though, that's the kind of idea, like the flexibility is what people need to track all these things, right? So like the doesn't just track completion. You can track like anything, like button presses, you know, anything you think of, pretty much. Like, yeah. So like that's the whole idea. Like that's why. But I think that they're building like things like generators. Like I think what you're showing there is a generator, right? Code generator, xAPI statement generator. So stuff like that. Like I've been like the stuff I talked about with people at the conference I was just mentioning, like was based around that. Like that would be super helpful if there was like a generator, like a a statement generator, which would like automatically generate the pieces of code that you need. And that's like the biggest hurdle I think right now with xAPI. So.
And I think that's exactly what this is. So can you guys see the statement builder up? Am I sharing again?
Yeah,
oh, it's tiny again. I have to make it bigger. Okay, there we go. Looks kind of blurry. Oh, there we go. Oh, a little bit bigger. There we go. Cool. So yeah, so I think that's pretty much how this is supposed to work. So this is the xAPI statement builder, and you choose your actor type, which is agent or group, but it's most of the time going to be an individual, I think. Show you my 100 email addresses. Well, let's just pick one, I guess. I don't know. I'm going to leave those blank and we'll just pretend they don't matter. But these are all the different verbs that you can use. Let me see if I can zoom in on that just a bit. But there's quite a lot. Answered, asked, attempted, attended, commented, completed, exited, experienced, interacted. So, that might be if someone picked up an object or something like that. I think this is not a complete list. I feel like there are more that are available in xAPI libraries. So like if you look on a different one of these links over here, and I think it might be this one, but there is an article somewhere in there. Sorry, it's not very helpful. Where you can see that you can access the full library, and it's that GBLX Unity, xAPI Unity library. Well, let's say interacted, sure. Object type. Let's try statement reference. No. Activity. So then you have, different activity information to fill out. I would need to really kind of maybe look at a guide on exactly how to use this, because I'm not entirely sure. There's definitely quite a lot here. I think it's just showing you, here's the statement. So it defined me as the actor. It defined the verb as interacted. And then I think it's kind of, waiting for the rest. So I think substatement, I can enter maybe additional code there. Seems like that's what the editor would be for. Well, though, I'm not sure. Maybe this is just for, no? I can edit that.
I'm curious how xAPI would
Alright.
handle something like a user picked up an object and placed it, within a specific target area, or like, or like in like interacted one object with a different object. Do you know how anything like that is accomplished?
So I think much the same way. You would just have so if we look down here in the code, it would probably identify multiple objects and the interaction between them and what happens if certain things happen.
Very cool.
I don't know, Jay, what do you think? That's kind of my
like
not very educated guess.
different ways to approach it. Like okay, like talking about like 3D environments, and the first thing that comes to my mind is Unity, like, right? Like, so I use Unity a lot, and I think a lot of the VR companies kind of base some technologies on Unity. Like they built, like, I mean, they have their own custom solutions, but sometimes they're using like the engines from at a base level, like Unity, for example. So like Unity, there's like different wrappers out there. Like for example, I was able to get like a working example posting to an LRS, get like these statements using like a wrapper, and that's one that I saw, but like I wasn't able to get that one. That one's really complex. I'll pass like only I'm not sure if I can like add a link here or not, but like I have maybe if you want to like search for it just quickly and bring it up on your screen. It's
I can also add this to the chat real quick. And I'll put it in the resources tab.
Is there a chat?
I'm putting it in the Slack channel.
Oh, okay.
Of course,
Yeah,
right?
let me post it. I'll post my link there actually. So that'll be easier, I think. But like basically this link that I have here, I was able to get this to post to the LRS. So this definitely like works. I tried a couple different examples actually. Like there's different ones out there. Like there's wrappers for Unity, like xAPI wrappers, right? And you need to like use those to connect with like take like what you're interacting with and like post it as statements to an LRS. So for example, I had button presses that I was testing out. Like you make like a little UI, like a user interface, and if you push like the button in your user interface, it'll post whatever like statement you make. It could be like interacted with, for example, like that's your verb that you pass along. So as you can see, like there's a lot more different options than just like Scorm only has like completion and incompletion states or like scores that it passes along to the LMS, but xAPI is like way more powerful because you can like take all these different like little interactions, like button press, or you push. You can go even as deep as like placing an object onto another object, like you were saying. It takes a little bit more work there, but all that's possible like with xAPI. So that's really like why it's becoming like more accepted as standard in place of Scorm, because Scorm is really like limited with. In addition, like Scorm can only be used inside like a. Okay, so if you're probably all familiar with a little bit with like learning management systems, and it's like kind of like a contained thing that you log into, and then you can only access your training from there. Like, you know, but with xAPI though, it can actually be anywhere. You can put your like Unity, if you publish like a Unity game or a Unity VR experience, it could be like on any website anywhere, and it can also send those statements to the your LRS. So it doesn't have to be, the people don't have to access like the experience through like a contained like thing that you log into. It could be just on any web page, like or things like that, right? It could be like, it'd be totally separate from like your LMS. And that's another like huge strength with like xAPI. Like it can be, it uses that code, and that's the whole idea. Like that's why it's so flexible, because be really anywhere, and as long as your xAPI code is hosted with that, then it can be like totally anywhere. Like, and it'll still send like your statements to an LRS though, you know. So which is separate from your game, where you're like not like your what I'm saying is like the system that you're hosting in doesn't have to like contain that anymore. It can be like totally separate from the VR experience. Like I think that's probably like a really good example like that right there, because VR experiences aren't really in an LMS, right? Like I mean, separate experiences. So yeah, this is like huge for VR experiences for sure. So I could probably go on and on about this stuff, but like so just I think what I'm gonna like, well, I'll try to wrap up with like here is or like and on a note here is like that this web page right here has like a really good walkthrough, and it'll work. Like I've gone through this whole thing, and it's like a really good, pretty good walkthrough, pretty straight to the point. It's not like I was saying earlier. I did try that article out that you brought up just a minute ago, and I didn't have much luck with it because it was really like it was really involved. And I'll just say so. Like with this one though, it's really pretty straight to the point, and I was able to get it working pretty quickly, you know. And I tried a couple actually other different ones too that are out there. This is the one that was most successful to me. So I'll just say that, like, yeah, I'll say that much. Just another example for you to add to the list there.
Yeah, that's awesome. It looks like they lay out the instructions pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's also from ADL.net, which was like the creators of SCORM. Like ADL.net created SCORM. It's Advanced Distributed Learning, I think what's ADL stands for. I can't remember, but like they created the SCORM like standard, and so they're kind of working on xAPI standards as well for Unity. So it's kind of important to keep in mind. Like all kind of people are kind of tackling this at the moment. It's not just one, you know, like not just ADL that's trying to tackle that right now, but there's also like other companies out there that are making like wrappers and generators, like you showed earlier, the generator. You know, like so different people are trying to tackle the like how to make it like more straightforward, I guess, and like not root through code. But yeah, anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's no, I think that's a really helpful addition, and definitely, guys, I put it up on the resources channel on Slack, and if you have any resources to add or anything to fix, if I got something wrong on here, like by all means say so. I pulled from a lot of different sources and just kind of slapped it together, to be honest. So you know, if you guys feel like there's stuff here that, you know, maybe is misleading or you know, could be better described or shown, like you know, go in here and you know, make some edits if you have the time and you want to contribute. You know, I'm happy. It's a community document, right? So it's for everyone. But yeah,
Yeah, you did well.
I think that's a really good question, Kristen, as far as like I'm starting to think about like some of the stuff that I did for the Unity class, and there are certain things like that may be expressed. It doesn't seem like it would be a score in the sense of like pass or fail, but more like when somebody does something, a variable is assigned a number or is added to, or so that can be a way to create possibly a statement of multiple objects interacting, like depending on what it was that you're trying to measure.
Yeah, I could totally see that being super valuable. Like, let's say, like, we track a learner's performance, do like something very specific that might allude to like a misconception or like a shortcut of like a procedure that they need to know. Being able to sort of track and like identify those instances would be really telling as to the any like a learner's like proficiency with something.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings up the point that VR is about experiential learning, and that's where where it really shines as a medium. And there's a lot of ways we can track that information, to create some valuable information and insight into how well did the solution work, and what could have been done better.
Yeah, I
Like
think
Jay
this
said,
is
there's a lot of people working on this. That's
Really track
yeah.
anything via API. So like, it really comes down to probably like the initial design of like these experiences. Like, what do you want to track? Like, what defines success in your particular simulation, right? Like, what choices do you need to make to satisfy? Uh, I guess I'm just kind of thinking of how what Tailspin does a bit, and like maybe like okay, if you choose these like particular narrative options, um, if a person like chooses those in the VR experiences and goes down like they choose the right like options depending on the scenario, like maybe they're not right, but they're like the most correct, most satisfying options in that narrative dialogue or whatever, and you can track all those clicks on if you, like not a click, but like in your like your VR, um, you click on a button in the VR experience or whatever, and you choose that dialogue option. You can track all that stuff, and it'll send it to like the LRS. Like if you choose like option 1 or option 2 in a branching narrative scenario, then it'll track like user chose option 1, and it'll send that
Yeah,
statement to your LRS. So it'll track those. It's a super like it's super flexible, but I think that sometimes maybe you might have to involve a developer possibly if you want to get really down into like super detailed feedback in your LRS, right? Like so, but I think it all comes from the initial perspective of like designing from the front. Like you have to like think about like okay, what's going to be like what do I need to like show to find success in this particular scenario, right? Like
yeah.
what
I'm kind of
interactions do I need to
curious.
do I need a button or
I'm kind of curious, Kristen or Leslie. Do you guys have anything to share about how maybe like transfer or tailspin, and what kind of user inputs they track for training, or what kind of what do people want to know? I guess.
you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
So at Transfer, our product was created. We're kind of in the middle of developing a version 2.0 of the Transfer platform. So the original Transfer platform really doesn't track a lot. Our assessments are essentially, there are certain criteria that, behind the scenes Unity is listening for, like, did they put the wrench on the bolt within 12 seconds of being told to do so or not? And so it's very binary, like, yes, they did it, or no, they didn't. So then those checkpoints are essentially assigned a weight. So by the end of the sim, if you haven't passed enough of those checkpoints with a success of, like, yes, you did this in the time allotted, then you kind of just, it's either pass fail of that particular simulation. So it's very, very rudimentary right now. And we are in the process of trying to come up with, kind of what you're describing here, and rethinking how can we be a little bit more dynamic? How can we use user stories to come up with success criteria? I haven't heard anyone mention xAPI yet, but that's because it's a little bit outside of my department. We have a department of, like, learning scientists that I think are kind of tackling those kinds of problems. So I hope we're heading in this direction of, like, having the ability to gather this much information, like Kristen said, like, knowing, okay, all we can track right now is, did they put the wrench on the correct bolt? But we can't track, like, okay, if they didn't put it on the correct bolt, what were they doing? Like, did they put it on the bolt next to it, or did they put it on another part of the engine? And so that would give us some information too about, maybe they have misconceptions, or they, trying to get into the mindset of what the trainee's doing and what's stopping them. So I hope we're heading more in this direction. We're definitely not there yet. I think any successful VR learning company is going to have to be able to do this to stay competitive, because without data, you can't prove that your learning product is doing what you're saying it's doing, right? You just can't without data to back it up. So yeah, I'm curious about this subject. It's not something I know a lot about, but I'm hoping Transfer does better about this in the future, but I think it's a long path to kind of get there, because like you said, it can be pretty complex, and VR as a 3D space where there's just so many, it's like really exponential amount of things that a trainee could be doing in that space. And then the overwhelm of, like, now we have too much data and we can't sort through it. So trying to figure out what are the key things we're looking for, how do we come up with ways to assess for it in a way that gives us meaningful data that we can then act on in future design. So
those are definitely all really good goals. I think for any business, developing training to consider, what data to track, how to track, not just how to track it, but, like, what are you going to use it for, right? That's important. And there's definitely a lot of data available. I think you brought up a good point before too about, there are things that you're going to be tracking in Unity to create the interaction. Like, if they don't put the wrench in the right spot within 12 seconds, is there going to be a pop-up window that reminds them, like, hey, this is what you have to do to move forward? Because that's something that's already going to be in the code.
Yeah, it's already listening for these certain things, and the sim won't move forward without that positive action. So, and our developers and engineers have told us we can track anything and everything, but that's overload comes. So we need to then figure out what's the sieve, like how do we know which information is important to track and what is just background noise. So.
Yeah. I can
Right.
share
Okay.
a little bit of a sort of a case study for an HVAC. We did a series of different HVAC type trainings. And actually the reason I know I can share is because part of this was part of my Dev Learn talk from last year. But one of the things that we did is we created a competency model for like a specific procedure or process that learners like were designed to master or at least show proficiency in. And similar to what it sounds like you do at your work, Leslie, in terms of tracking is, identify those key behaviors that need to be completed, correctly before one being able to move on, but then also that like dictates a score, and some are, weighted more heavily than others. Those behaviors were actually tied directly to our competency model. So we were able to, like, let's say a competency model would be like the competency is like an HVAC recovery service that's comprised of several different steps, which comprise of various actions, right? And so what we did is we translated those actions into things that the system was listening for. And then also, in addition to, just getting it done, there were like timed hints, if there's the learner was idling, maybe they'll get some corrective feedback or some attentive feedback. If they did a incorrect action, there were hints that sort of guided the learner to the more appropriate action, or sort of trying to get them there without telling them what to do. And then so they actually were given, I think you could get up to 5 hints, or at least that's as much as the rubric is. Our rubric was, I think, went from a score of 1 to 5, and depending on how many hints you triggered, for any particular like key behavior that we were looking for, you get an associated like number of points, which are then compounded depending on like weight. So like, if we're thinking about a recovery service and the steps within that, okay, so how important is that particular step to predicting someone's ability to be proficient with this entire procedure? So we did do some weighting there, depending on like how critical is this particular factor in enabling them to do the procedure correctly type thing. But yeah, as you can imagine, it was like extremely granular, had to identify every single key behavior that made up this like entire procedure, which, could come out to something like 70 something behaviors that you're looking for, but every single one of those individual, micro behaviors was graded on a rubric. That way, in aggregate, it had a very, very accurate representation of someone's ability to do a specific thing within the overall performance of a service. That's one case study. I was very involved in that scoring. That's why I know it like in and out. But really took inspiration from what's called evidence-centered design, which is essentially a predictive model. It's also a design framework, but it's meant to be a predictive model based off learners' actions within. It was created for game-based learning, but within, the game or the serious game system. How can we use that behavior that we collect to then predict proficiency or competency within higher order skills? So hope that was helpful.
No, that's awesome. I was in that presentation at DevLearn, and yeah, I thought it was awesome, and I kind of appreciated the little reminder on it. And I think that that's that's important, especially when we're building performance support training, to think about, how am I going to look at this data? Not just, what does it mean when somebody needs 5 hints versus just one?
Right.
And that's, that's a good point too, is like, if we think about how all of our most favorite games are designed, right? Because they really can be counted as learning experiences, if we analyze them that way, right? A game teaches you how to play it, so at some point you're learning something. And games will, I feel like they have a framework that we can follow for those kinds of immersive interactive experiences that kind of lead the way for that, and at least give us some parameters on, like, okay, when are these metrics like just part of the experience and built into the game, and I'm kind of measuring it that way, or when do I need to build out a statement to track that separately, in an LMS or LRS.
Yeah, I know that, like, it's definitely a lot of time and attention should probably go into defining what data is important, because I think all of us here have have mentioned that there is so much data that is possible to collect. But how much of it do you really need, and how much of it is actually valuable for analyzing and revealing, any of the research questions you may have about either your learners or your experience. And so, you know, I feel like, especially since we're like sort of in the early stages of using xAPI and even Squirm. I mean, let's be honest. I don't know how many VR experiences are do report and or Squirm compatible, but we're not yet at that point where we can just mine a bunch of VR behavioral data. I just don't think that most systems are robust like that right now, unless you're like EA or Blizzard or something that creating a ton of like games. And so I think with us as learning designers, it's important for us to identify what type of learning data is most valuable to us and what we're trying to prove, right? Like, I think most of us are striving for like efficacy. So
and you just reminded me, my husband is playing this game called PUBG. I guess one of his friends plays it, and they were playing together for a while. And I was watching him play. Sometimes I like watching video games more than I actually like playing them, because my hand-eye coordination is really terrible. So it's more fun to watch someone else win than to struggle and fail myself, I guess.
I feel you, me too.
That's why I really should watch more game streaming and casts and stuff, like just for the seeing the game and learning more about it. But so what I found interesting about this game though was that it's like player versus player PvP, and they have like 100 people join at a time, and they go around and try to pick each other off until there's only one person remaining, right? And the map gets smaller and smaller, and they have to like make it to the restricted area within a certain time frame, or like the blue fog comes for them and like takes their health down until they get back into the right area, and then it shrinks down again and so forth. So anyway, after someone kills you, you can watch the replay of your death from their perspective, which crazy. So you get to see what the person who got you in the game saw, but then you could also replay, like separately in a separate menu area, you could replay all of your past games, like the whole thing. and I just thought, wow, like that's so much information. I'm it's probably, maybe it's stored locally. I'm not sure, but I also thought, like, how valuable would that be for learning experiences if we were actually like recording what they saw, like, and seeing how they used it, and just that would be maybe really valuable for a pilot test.
Mm-hmm.
A little overwhelming for like full rollout, but yeah,
I could
that could be
that kind of feature. In Unity, you can have a camera following your player. Generally in VR, the camera is like the viewpoint of the player, but you can have as many cameras as you want in a scene. The camera's following the player, but the way that I see that, like, the situation where that might be super useful in like our work is like if you're doing emergency response training, right? Like imagine you're designing something for a firefighter or EMT or police officer or anyone who's in high risk, quick decision-making type scenarios, and then they maybe make the wrong decision and they end up, losing their life in the game or whatever the case may be. Having that third-person perspective to sort of analyze their own choices from that, kind of removed view, and maybe giving a better sense of where they were situationally in the scene. I can see that being super valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, seeing it from, like, the accident victim or the patient's perspective. Like I could even think like nursing training or bedside manner training for physicians, like, showing them like kind of, immersing them in the patient's story and giving them that perspective. I think I've even seen a project that was something like that, like empathy training for physicians. I don't know if it was for VR, but anyway, yeah, just that's that would be a valuable perspective to include in design for sure.
What was brought up about rubrics might be a good framework to think about, like with xAPI, because rubrics have like levels of quality of like satisfying like an objective, right? Or like a situation that's, and those are like more overhead like levels, like, and so like all these different little micro interactions can be folded into those like rubric levels. Like there can be like for example, like maybe like universities, for example, have like 5 different levels of like, quality and what is submitted and so forth. Or it could be different like numbers, but like basically it defines like they're kind of like overall levels of like quality in the submitted project, like, right? So like putting all these little like micro interactions within like okay, so like all these, like you can think about like they press this button or they do these things or they choose this little thing, it would go into this category of like a rubric. Like, so there's like maybe 5 different levels of success. Yeah, that's probably a good way to approach like xAPI design, I would think. So yeah, thanks for sharing what you say, Kristen. I think that's probably like a good, it actually sounds like both your companies, or at least the PR companies that I've heard from so far, like I've been kind of approaching it. It sounds like they actually are using API instead of SCORM, because you were saying earlier that like you can track anything with your companies right now. So it kind of sounds like to me that you actually are using xAPI instead of SCORM. SCORM is super like constrictive. So I think that your companies actually are using xAPI.
Oh, I should say, I don't, our company is not using xAPI, but I know it's like something that's been talked about. When I went for that use case, I was explaining, that was actually custom like APIs for tracking. So like, yeah, super custom, but I could absolutely see, you know, as we create more experiences, sort of switching over to xAPI is going to be more valuable for sure, especially with the increased compatibility of xAPI and adoption, you know, within learning and development.
Yeah, I definitely do see it like as being the next standard of like tracking and evaluating like success. So, yep, I really appreciated the discussion tonight. It was really, you know, it's kind of it's modern, you know, it's definitely like important to talk about. So, yeah, thanks for the discussion tonight.
Yeah, I had this.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a good one. It's meaty.
It was meaty.
It's funny because I'm actually working on some HVAC like training right now as well in Unity. So,
Oh, cool.
that's definitely on my mind right now. Not VR, but it's like traditional 3D, but it
Mhm.
still involves a lot of like similar mechanics, though, you know, for sure. So, anyway, yeah,
Did
thanks for sharing everything.
I know most people who were here already left, or half the people that were here left, but we're not meeting next month, right? We're just going to take a break so that people involved in DevLearn are available. DevLearn.
Yeah, I know a number of us will be out at DevLearn. And so it actually falls on the same night, you know, really at the same
Yeah,
time. And
the
in
first
case
night of
there's something
DevLearn.
going on,
Yeah.
like an event going on that Wednesday.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
however, yeah, go
I
ahead.
think we're gonna cancel.
It will be, yeah, it'll be difficult to join from there. But we will come back November in full swing, ready to share everything that we learned from DevLearn and all of the tracks.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, good
Very
plan.
cool.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. Thank you.
See you
Yeah.
not next month, but the month after.
See you in a while. Yeah.
I hope you all have a
Happy
great
Halloween.
Take care.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
Bye.
Bye,
Have a good
guys.
October. Bye now.
Bye.